I just wanted to thank you guys for coming here to be with us tonight. This is a speaker series that we started in 2020. That's a collaboration between OAWWA's Diversity Inclusion Committee and the Young Professionals, which will talk about what each of those two groups do briefly, in case you're interested in getting a little bit more involved with AWWA. And before we get into the presentation, I just would like to ask that you mute your mics during the presentation so there's no disruptions. We'll open the floor up for Q&A afterwards. The Diversity in Water series goal is we really wanted to highlight the stories of leaders in the water industry from diverse backgrounds and really give them a forum to discuss how their identity impacted their journey and have an open discussion on how they see diversity playing a role in the future of the water industry and to talk about such issues. So with that, I will turn over to Savina to talk about the Diversity Committee.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for making it to our Diversity in Water series. We're really excited to have you. Just to talk briefly about the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. We are a new group. Well, not a new group. We have just restarted this past couple years in bringing diversity and inclusion initiatives to the Ohio water industry. So we are a group that shows you different ways that we include diversity and inclusion into your industry, into your personal, into your utility and the AWA as a whole. We do events, challenges, just to open your minds to different biases and to get people thinking about ways to include diversity and inclusion and to make a difference within our industry. So if you are like-minded or you consider yourself a diversity champion and you would like to be involved in our initiatives, please reach out to us. We are recruiting new members. My name is Savina Phillips. Again, you can reach out to me, Savina Phillips at clevelandwater.com. You can also reach out to Franco Noche, our vice chair, in regards to being a part of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Thank you all again for being here. We're super excited. It is Women's History Month, and thank you for coming, and you all have a good evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Savina. So now to talk a little bit about Young Professionals Committee. What we are is we're essentially the welcome mat into AWWA. We're trying to get you into AWWA in the water industry early on and really make those connections with others in the industry that'll last your entire life. So we do a little bit of everything from career panels, happy hours, we've done hockey games, let's see what else, a lot of university outreach, plant tours, very important, and just in general, trying to support and encourage participation in the water industry as a whole. So YPs are generally people who are 35 years old or younger or have been in the water industry for less than 10 years, but we welcome anyone. A lot of our events are open to just anyone. You can come hang out and go through the water plant tour. That's cool, even if you're a more seasoned professional. So it's just really open and a really fun group to get involved in. We have a couple events that are coming up on Tuesday, March 23rd from 6 to 7:30. We have a virtual e-career panel. And then throughout this whole COVID thing, we've had regular e-happy hours since we haven't been able to get together for in-person happy hours. And the next one is TBD. Also, last year we did a virtual litter cleanup. So if you are looking for an interesting project to do, I organized the virtual cleanup last year. And if you're a student or just a water professional in general who's looking for an interesting project to work on, but just don't really have a lot of time, contact me because I've got it pretty pretty planned out on how you could do it pretty easily from last year, and then you can do a better job than I did and take it on from there. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank the diversity and water planning team. There's Savina Phillips, Sapna Mulkey, Julie Laskovitz, and myself. And now to introduce the real stars of the show, Sierra has been with Black Veatch since 2005, where she is currently a project manager and office lead for the Columbus, Ohio team. She manages a variety of projects, including water and wastewater treatment, conveyance and rehab, as well as dam infrastructure. Sierra has been an active member of AWWA throughout her career and now serves as the chair of the Ohio section of the American Water Works Association. Danella is the administrator for the City of Columbus Division of Water and is responsible for overseeing supply, treatment, and distribution operations covering 3 water plants, producing an average of 138 million gallons per day of drinking water, over 1.2 million customers in the Central Ohio region. Danella is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Ohio with over 31 years experience in both private and public sector. And she's also, like Sierra, been very active with AWWA throughout her career and now serves as the director of the Ohio section. So with that, Danella and Sierra, we are very honored to have you here to speak with us tonight, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Megan. I'm going to share screen here. Sorry, are you guys, Megan, or I guess Danella, you can tell me, seeing that okay?
I can hear you and I can see it.
All right, wonderful. We'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. I've really enjoyed this series so far, so it's truly an honor to be here with you all, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion and kicking off Women's History Month. I felt it only appropriate, it must be my COVID brain, that I've been stuck in slippers or sneakers for a year straight, right? That we start this conversation about women in water with a picture of heels. This is my view from my work from home office. And it's not always that fancy, but in all seriousness and all joking aside, this picture was taken, it was inspired by a scene from a movie. And so I'm challenging you, we're starting off here with a little bit of a quiz. If you know the movie and the scene that inspired this picture, and it is relevant to this discussion. So if you know, shoot it over in the chat window. I'm going to take a look during questions, and you get bragging rights if you get the answer first. If you're my friend on Facebook, you're not allowed to participate. You're disqualified. So we are going to take, given the theme here, women in water and diversity, we are going to take a little bit of a gender diversity slant with our discussion tonight. But if you are a man in the house, thank you for being here. We appreciate you, and please stay. Don't leave. I promise there won't be any male bashing as part of this discussion. I'm going to start off with a little bit about myself, my life, my career, and then Danella will do the same, and then we will kind of circle back to focus a little bit more on DE&I, some items related to DE&I. So if you don't know me, I was actually born and raised in Saudi Arabia. So my mom is British. My dad was from West Virginia originally. And I grew up in a house way back here in the middle of the desert in this camp called Udalia. So this was a hugely diverse community, people from all over the world. This on the right here is my best friend since first grade. She is a Muslim Egyptian. And on the bottom left here is some of my siblings, missing about 2 of my brothers and several more babies that have come along the way since this picture was taken. But, you know, I have a brother and sister who are half Thai. I have a brother who's married to a man. I have a sister who's in a biracial marriage and therefore a biracial niece. I also have a niece who's going through gender transformation. So, I wanted to set the stage a little bit in terms of my filter and my upbringing, and really with the theme of a lot that happened over last year. There was, the events that happened through 2020, as well as some personal interactions in my own life, made me realize that despite all this diversity that I was brought up amongst, especially with the ones I hold most dear to me, I have a lot of work to do in terms of inclusivity. And I'm going to talk more about that here further in our discussion. And so this quote that I have here is one of my mom's, one of my favorite quotes from my mom. And she, I often ask her, I have one child, and she, raised 5 of us all across the world and traveled all over the place. And I find myself asking her quite a bit, how the heck did you do it? And she always tells me, in life, you must always have a plan A, but you better be well prepared to operate on plan F. And if you've seen any of my technical presentations on some of the projects I help to manage, I use that quote too, because I think it applies not only to our personal life, but to some of our work as well. So I got shipped off to, I shouldn't say shipped off to, I went to boarding school in Pennsylvania for high school. And then from there, I went to Drexel University, and I majored in environmental engineering. So I did BS/MS, and I worked with 2 consulting firms over the 5 years. From there, I started my career with Black Veatch in Philadelphia. And about 5 years later, I moved to Columbus, Ohio in 2010. I was ready for some changes, both for professional and personal reasons. And, I love Columbus. I'm super happy here and have really enjoyed the community of water professionals in Ohio. So the picture on, it's funny to me because I think about growing up in a very conservative Muslim country where gender equality certainly wasn't a thing, right? It was quite the opposite. And I always just kind of felt like, in a very naive way, actually, I felt that like when I came to America, that would just disappear and it wouldn't exist. And then I went to college at Drexel, as I mentioned, and environmental engineering was a very balanced major, right? We were actually 50% women. So again, I was living a little bit in an alternate reality. And I included this picture on the bottom left because I'll never forget that day. It was very early in my career. I was doing a confined space entry, and I came up from the space, and there were 6 older white men in suits, just kind of watching what I was doing. And for a minute there, I felt intimidated, right? But then the concept that Bob Davis talked about when he presented for this series was when preparation meets opportunity. And that really applied here because quickly my mental focus was on my team, the task at hand. I felt like I was prepared and very capable and competent to take the information back that I needed to accomplish what the team, needed to do. And I think that's a very good mindset to carry forward if you are a minority or an underrepresented group and you're in a situation where you're feeling intimidated, is to keep that in mind. So moving on here, why did I choose environmental engineering and water? For me, it was a very intentional decision. I know some people end up in this industry kind of by accident, but I will never forget the day where I was kind of sitting at the kitchen table with my dad talking about college majors. And honestly, I really wanted to be in international business because growing up kind of all over the world, traveling the world, I couldn't see myself giving that up. But the reality was I was not a language person. I was a math and science girl. My dad sort of introduced, and environmental engineering was newer at the time, and he introduced that concept to me, and it stuck. And I never looked back. I never changed my mind. I never doubted it to this day. It's been a great fit for me and my interests and my passions. I was the president of Earth Savers Club, right? In like middle school, I didn't have boy band pictures on my walls. I had like pictures from National Geographic and Ranger Rick of like animals and scenes from the planet. That was me growing up. So it was a good fit. I did include a picture of my daughter here because, of course, thinking ahead, what we're leaving behind to the next generation is a big inspiration for me. And that artwork on the right there, I didn't help her do. She created that herself at about the age of 6. And certainly I have it hanging in my office, that one. The water piece of it really came from, I have a strong passion really in nutrition and what we put into our body and how that impacts our quality of life. And so that's kind of how the water piece came into it for me. So I'm going to move from there just into some guiding principles and spend a little bit of time on this slide. These are kind of the concepts that helped me through in my career and my life. And first and foremost, this is a picture of a sign in my office, which I don't get to see much these days, but the thought behind it is I still carry with me every day. And so that's work hard and be nice to people. I think fundamentally, if we all do that, a lot of the other things fall into place in our careers and in our interaction with others in life. But we have to balance that work hard with play hard, right? So you only live once. And that actually is what the saying is on my necklace. And I think about that a lot because we lead very busy lives, very fast-paced lives, and we have to think about where we're directing our time and our energy, not just in our careers, but in our personal lives as well. This number 3, I think, is probably one of my favorites, being that your mental energy is finite. So we talk a lot about time management and prioritization in our careers. And I would encourage you all to think about that in terms of your mental energy. And it's not an infinite bucket, right? And so we need to guard it and direct it with intention. And an example of that to apply to your daily lives is, say a coworker calls you and they say something that frustrates you or irritates you, or you hang up the phone and you're thinking about it, right? It's kind of this nagging thought, like, why did that person say that? What did they mean by that? And be aware of those thoughts. Set them aside and direct that mental energy somewhere positive that's helping you achieve your goals and where you're headed. And don't let those kind of little things take away from your mental focus. Stress management, I think this is a huge one. In our industry, no matter what role you have, right, we have an impact on the environment and public health. That's a huge responsibility to bear. And so, our work lives can have a lot of stress and pressure. And to me, what helps me in that realm is thinking about perception. And stress is perceived. And so not everything we do can be perceived as stressful, or we'd all burn out. So be mindful with, I think stress has a place. For me, it does anyways. I appreciate stress. It kicks my adrenaline into gear, and it helps me get stuff done when I really need that extra push. But you can't operate like that all the time. And so know the difference and help your team that you're working with know the difference too, on when we need to be stressed about things and when it's not worth stressing about. I was in a yoga class, and we were talking about a author and in a book, and she was asked if she had a daughter about the same age as my daughter, and she was asked, if you could tell your daughter only one thing, one piece of advice, what would it be? And her response was, your only job / priority in life is to not disappoint yourself. And I think that is such a great takeaway for everyone in terms of your career and your personal life, right? Because if you're not disappointing yourself, you're in the right mental space. And just like item 1, things fall into place. Moving on here, follow your gut. Often, especially if you're early in your career, you're going to find situations where you're not necessarily agreeing with the consensus in the room, right? There's that voice in your head that's like, something's not right, something's off. We need to go double check X, Y, and Z. And often when you're in a room full of very experienced people, you're intimidated to speak up. And I would encourage you always to follow your gut and speak up, because you have a different perspective than everyone else in the room. You're probably the person who's in the weeds and in the details of executing that specific task. So you can bring that knowledge to the group. And if you speak up and it's a non-issue, then that helps you to be at peace, right? And know that it's not. And so that helps us with item 3. You can set that issue aside. And you've learned something. You've learned why maybe you don't need to worry about it, which is I think a win-win. So follow your gut. And this one, you are worthy, you are worthy, you are worthy. So, as a minority in a lot of situations, and if you come from an underrepresented group, I think sometimes it's just so important to have this own internal self-dialogue with ourselves. This shirt actually says worthy. I don't know if I have anyone in attendance who loves India RE. Actually, I know there's at least one out there who loves India RE as much as I do, but she's one of my favorite music artists. This shirt comes from one of her concerts, if you're interested in checking her out. But sometimes we have to have that internal self-dialogue with ourselves and give ourselves that confidence we need. And be aware of your own internal dialogue, because that really sets the stage for how you interact with others, and then thus how they treat you. Yes, without fear, no, without guilt. So we all have the demands of our jobs, earning our paycheck, our responsibilities that we have to do, right? So outside of that, if you're taking on other things, if it's not like an HE double hockey stick yes, then it's probably a no. And say no without guilt, and don't feel like you have to explain yourself. It goes back to managing your mental energy. And then finally, our energy is contagious. So this is a little twofold here. So airplane analogy. When they talk to you about putting your oxygen mask on an airplane, what do they tell you? They say, put yours on first and then worry about your children, right? And this applies to us, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't help our teams. We can't help our clients, our boss, our kids, if our energy bucket isn't filled. And so think of that airplane analogy when you're setting your priorities. And then also just in terms of this virtual world, I've been thinking about this one a lot, right? Like our personal interactions are so different, and the way people perceive us and interact with us is different. And so we've been talking on our team at Black Veatch about smile before you pick up the phone, not because the person can see you, not even when you're on video, but it helps set a positive tone in your voice, which can change the context of that conversation. And then try to always hang up the phone on a positive note if possible. So moving on here, just a couple words of wisdom. Take control of your career. Be observant. Don't take everything at face value. Just because someone says something doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Make moves. Don't put yourself in a box, and certainly don't let others put you in a box. So take myself, for example. If you had told that girl who grew up in Saudi that by choice, you would be living in Columbus, Ohio with by choice an only child, I would have told you you're absolutely out of your mind and laughed and walked away. But here I am by choice and loving every minute of it. So, the point of this is we all need to have goals and plan, right? It's important to have like kind of a 1, 3, 5 year type goal and plan for yourself, but you be willing to reevaluate that, because things change in your life and in your career, and make sure you're doing what's right for you. No one else is walking in your shoes. So of course, never burn bridges. If you haven't figured it out yet, you will very quickly. Within the water community, we are a small group of people. And so treat your relationships like gold. Always conduct yourself professionally. And the bottom right, I think, authenticity builds trust. So people will work with people who are real and not perfect. So don't be afraid to be yourself in your interactions, even in your professional and career interactions. And then moving on here, final little bit here is network and get involved outside of your 8 to 5. So, this is a common theme we're hearing from all of our speakers, because it really does pay dividends to your career. So I I purposely kept this slide very simple because this is a message that's really important to me, that, you know, your identity and your career is not tied up in your current employer. It is yours to take with you wherever you go, your network of people in your career. And so treat it like that. And I am incredibly thankful to Black Veatch. They are very supportive of my involvement. However, there have been times in my career where I've chosen to, you know, use my own money, use my own time, especially early in my career, to get involved in things. And my message is not that you should go use your own time and money. That's not the point of my message. But it is that, you know, if your employer is not in a place to support you, don't let that be a roadblock. Don't let that be a massive hurdle. There are other ways around that. One example, at our annual conference, we have evening networking events. You can buy a ticket to that event alone and come. Use your contacts through YP and Diversity Committee to help get you engaged and meet people when you show up to those events. So the other thing I wanted to share is just quickly a little bit about my AWWA story. And, you know, I started in Pennsylvania with the conference committee and YP committee. I joined AWWA because a professor made me. So shout out to Dr. Chuck Haas at Drexel University. But then started in Pennsylvania. So then I moved to Ohio, right? I didn't know anyone. I didn't know my coworkers. I didn't have family here. I really wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, to be honest. But within the first 2 weeks of landing in Ohio, I went to a dinner and I met Danella. And Danella was the chair at the time. And who knew that we'd be having this full circle moment, right? 10 years later, where now I'm chair and she's director. And so she introduced me to Robin, who was YP chair, and then it went from there, and meeting more and more people in this water community. And I did want to, you know, Danella has acted as really an inspiration to me and a support system to me, especially when I had an infant. Becoming a working mother is quite the shock to the system in so many ways. And it was inspiring to have someone who'd been through it and successfully made it through to look up to through that time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Danella.
Thank you, Sierra, for the kind words and sharing your experience and words of wisdom. Kind of going back on, as Sierra said one time, roping her in to participating in AWWA. I think it was luck and chance that we had a meeting only 2 weeks after she started here. And as an inspiration, I don't know about that. I just know we had a lot of conversations before she even had kids about, you know, what it takes to balance being a working mother and having children and all the things that come with that, from nursing to what, you know, not sleeping at night and stuff like that. So I fondly remember those conversations. So, but with that said, you know, Sierra asked me to be part of this, you know, this presentation. To be honest, I think she could have carried the whole presentation herself, but she wanted to include me kind of as part of her story and involvement in AWWA. And with that, you know, I agreed to it. I'd share a little bit of my experiences, and probably because I'm a few years older than she is, and is a little bit different, you know, how I chose my career and how I got to where I'm at today, maybe a little bit different path. So, you know, I thought I'd start out kind of sharing, you know, she talked about how she knew what she wanted to do when she was in high school, growing up, her passion for saving the planet. And I kind of chuckle at that when she talked about that. But anyway, mine was a little bit different. I grew up in Southern Ohio, an Appalachian part of Ohio. I grew up on a farm. I went to a very, very small high school. My graduating class had 47 people in it. And we didn't have career counselors. Living in a rural farming area, you know, I didn't have a lot of people to look up to for anything outside of farming and stuff. So how I got to become an engineer was lucky. Back then, since we didn't have career counselors, we took aptitude tests, and I actually have a copy on the screen here kind of showing the aptitude tests I took back in 1982 in 11th grade. And basically you took these aptitude tests, and then they would give you a list of various careers or various jobs out there. Some were, you know, skilled jobs and what have you that met your aptitude. And so if you look at this, if you really look at it, you know, a couple things to point out. My aptitude kind of pushed me. I was strong in math and strong in mechanical reasoning and spatial reasoning. So then I went to the chart and started looking at careers, and I kind of looked at architect and engineering, and I was like, oh, that looks kind of cool. And then I said, well, you know, I think they like make a lot of money. I think I'll do that. And when I told my parents, they kind of laughed because they didn't even know where that came from, because I had nobody. I didn't know an engineer. I really didn't know what engineering was about, but hey, I have the aptitude. I'm going to pursue that. And so that's kind of how I got where I got to go to college in engineering. So fortunately, it worked out well. Don't know how, but it did. So next slide, Sierra. Okay, so I went to Ohio University, not Ohio State, but Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. I went in civil engineering, and I've added a picture here. This is my graduating class of civil engineers, and it's kind of interesting. I kind of look at the back when we talk about diversity. I'm realizing this is my first opportunity that I got to see in a diverse environment of people when I went to college. And if the other key thing, you want to look at this photo, there was only 2 women engineers that was in the civil engineering program at the time I graduated. So I thought, you know, just looking back, I thought it was an interesting picture. You kind of chuckle a little bit when you kind of look at yourself 30 some years ago. So, but anyway, and then the next picture, you know, is a photo of when I first started my career at R.D. Zandy. So I got out of college, moved to Columbus, got my job with a consulting engineering firm, R.D. Zandy Associates, a local engineering firm here in Columbus, and you know, started working there, landfill work, and then eventually got into water wastewater utility design work, and that's kind of where my was my main design experience there in the at Zandy. I was there a little bit over not quite 18 years, right around about year 16, 17. I was kind of getting, you know, I've been there. My career advancement opportunities were very limited at that time, and I was ready for a change. So I was trying to figure out what my next steps were. And fortunately, a peer of mine had told me about an opportunity at the city of Columbus, working in, there was a position that was coming open for the section manager for the distribution engineering group. And it fit really well into my background and experience. So fortunately, after pursuing that opportunity, I got hired on at the city of Columbus in 2007 to manage the distribution engineering section. With that, you know, I advanced a couple of times within the city of Columbus, ultimately in my position now here as the administrator of water. So next slide, Sierra. So kind of this slide, I got a couple different things going on. You know, my main point is women can succeed at any career they choose. And first, I want to point out some facts at the top left-hand corner. So when I started working in engineering and graduated, you know, there was less than 10%, and I'm thinking around 7 to 8% of the graduates, engineering graduates, were women. So obviously it's a male dominated world. And to be honest, you know, I was fairly comfortable in that environment. I don't know, I grew up as a tomboy. I played on the all the boys teams because they didn't have women's softball back then for me to pursue like they do now, you know, basketball and so forth. So I guess I was kind of fairly comfortable in that, but the percentages were small, and you know, that was an environment that we was in. Fast forward today, you know, we're actually seeing the percentages increasing. Sierra made a comment about this. You know, they didn't have environmental engineering when I was at school, but I have participated in the OSU capstone environmental engineering, and it is almost a 50% split, men and women. But in general, engineering, the number of women in engineering field today has increased significantly. You know, 15, I've seen different things, 15, 18%. But the one fact that what I also read about is even though they start out that way, they're not staying in the field. And some of the research says it's a number of different reasons. One, it kind of goes back to, you know, some of the, I don't want to say stereotypes, but, you know, women are known, you know, starting a family, they go back and it's decided that they're going to stay home to help raise the family, and more of a traditional role. Also, the other research I read was interesting that, you know, some women, once they don't realize, like Sierra had indicated, her experiences when they started working, they realize it is a male dominant, and they're not comfortable working in that environment, and they choose to leave the career or go somewhere else. So that's unfortunate that's their experience, and I truly hope as we advance, you know, further, that won't be the case for all the up and coming women engineers. So, you know, one of the things, you know, Sierra was kind of chuckling about, you know, when you're a woman in any career, you know, it is a struggle sometimes with what we call work-life balance, or like, I guess the new terminology is work-life blend. And, you know, learning how to integrate all the facets of what our lives and you know, can be difficult. And, you know, we're known to have to raise the family. We have the children. Like I tell everyone, my first year of both my children was terrible. I hated it because I was nursing. I was getting up in the middle of the night. I didn't have any sleep. When I was, you know, back when I had my kids, there was no maternity leave. So I took as very little time off as possible because I had to take it off without pay. So, you know, I was, you know, nursing kids and up 2 or 3 times a night, not a lot of sleep. And it was rough, and it is rough. And so learning how to balance that and raise a family and go to work and then produce at work. And then, you know, if you have aspirations to continue to, you know, advance in your careers, learning how to balance that. So so it is a struggle, but you know, you can find, you know, you got to find out what works best for you, and it's a little bit different. I know Sierra has a different story. I mean, what happened for me to continue to advance in my career, my husband became a stay-at-home dad when my kids were young, and if he didn't do that, I wouldn't have been able to probably stay late a lot of nights working and doing what I'm doing, and stuff, you know, was able to do. So the other part of this slide is kind of ties into some of the stuff that Sierra had already mentioned. You know, she did her slides separately than I did. We just kind of had some pointers of what we wanted to talk about. So I did my keys to success. And it was kind of interesting that when we brought them together, we had a lot of similar themes and what we identified as key to our success of our careers and stuff like that. Number one item, work hard. You know, I think for any career, no matter what you're in, you know, go to work, produce, work hard, you know, that will pay dividends as you continue to advance in your career, as your supervisors, as your managers will see that. And you know, when the opportunities arise, that will pay dividends. Connect with others. You know, I feel I have a pretty good ability to connect with my peers and workers, you know, and I try to get to know them just outside, not just work related, you know their families, know, you know, their interests, sports. I can talk sports up and down with anybody out there. So, you know, I think that really helps when you're trying to work to just have a good connection, you know, like one of the sayings that Sierra had, being genuine connection with your peers. That rolls into be kind, you know, always treat people, whether it's your peers, whether it's your clients, whether it's, you know, people in your industry. We got to keep, you know, treat everyone kind. I think this is very key, especially for women. Be confident and have a voice. When you're sitting at the table, and I know it's probably harder when we're younger in our careers, but you got to be confident enough to speak up and talk about whether it's that project or the concerns of your CEO, what have you. If you sit and be silent, you're going to be pushed off to the side. So I think as you continue to advance in your career, you need to be very confident and you know, comfortable speaking up. Ask for new opportunities. I keep having this conversation with my son, who's only about 2 years into his career after college. You know, don't set yourself into one, you know, put yourself in a silo, however you say it. I mean, if you want to continue to have the ability to advance, if there's opportunities, well, you know, that's in your company or where you're working, you know, ask for those opportunities. Just, you know, that shows that you have an interest in expanding your horizons and learning more. And I think that's a great thing. You do not want to shoehorn yourselves into one area. And then grow your network. Surround yourself with strong, intelligent, and capable peers. And this is something that you'll do over the extent of your career. Early on, it'll be small, but as you continue to get more years of experience and get involved with organizations, and I'll talk about that, that's the next bullet item, you'll have a lot of friends and a lot of peers, and that paid dividends later on in your careers. Because I definitely didn't have a female mentor when I started my career. I have men that was kind of my mentors, but you know, I have friends, I'll call them friends because they could have been my supervisors back then, that I'm still friends with now. And I have women that maybe they weren't mentors, but they were good friends that now I can call on, and we can share and discuss things and stuff like that. So continue to create that network of friends and peers. And part of that you can do, and we're going to, this theme of getting involved with the industries and organizations around you. Early in my career at Zandy, I wanted to get involved in an organization. And this is kind of ties into the theme of being inclusive. So when I was at OU, I was involved in ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, student organization. When I got out of college and started at Zandy, I wanted to stay involved in something. And I went to my first ASCE local luncheon event here in Columbus, and I go there and I'm a young female engineer, and I walk in this luncheon type get together, and it was mainly all men. I would say looking back, I would say most of them were white men, and sat there, and the whole time I didn't have anyone speak to me. And so that was very disappointing. And I walked away and I never went back. I never went to another meeting. I didn't renew my membership, and there it was. So it was better part of almost 10 years before I was fortunate enough to have John Sadowich came to RD Zandy, and he was my supervisor, and he was really active in AWWA, and there's actually an award named after him now. And he got me involved in AWWA, signed me up, encouraged me to go to events, got me to meet some people there that, you know, some names that we know now, like Mike Caprella, Larry Valentine's, Tim Wolf. I took me to an event, and those folks were very welcoming, and it went from there. And within a year or so after that, I was involved in the not the state, but district level. And then as soon as I got off district level, I was on the state governing board, and it's gone from there. So I very much encourage people to be involved in industry organization, in particular AWWA, and you have a lot of great things that, you know, you can get involved in. We've seen the YP, the diversity and inclusion. There's a lot of things you can get involved in. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and it kind of ties into, I guess, the theme of me being woven into Sierra's story here, but pay it forward, be a mentor or an advocate. Personally, you know, as a woman engineer, as a graduate of OU, I've gone back to a couple of events to meet some college female engineers, wanting, you know, giving them advice on, you know, the career or what to do. I love going down there, talking to them. I've presented an OSU capstone here, and gone to after hours events with those. And we always tend to have conversations. I love just being around young professionals. I love going to the YP events we have at AWWA and talking to the individuals there. So, you know, for me, it's a way to connect with them, give back. You know, I think some of my mentorship, you know, is more organic. It's just being available. We have in AWWA in particular, a lot of capable and strong women that are available. We're approachable. So to reach out to us, you know, all of us has no problem helping out folks, you know, giving them advice, supporting them. So, you know, it's great, you know, to be part of the organization. So, next slide. So I think this is once again facts. I think we're kind of running over a little bit here, so I'm going to quick, but I did want to make one point. It's interesting fact here, and I know a couple of these folks are on this, but you know, in the 78 years of Ohio section AWWA, we've only had 7 women chairs. And 6 of them's been in the last 11 years. So I think we've made a lot of progress, and I think we can continue to do more, but I thought I would share that to you. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sierra to take it home.
Thanks, Danella. I always love hearing Danella's perspective, because it really energizes me in the sense that, you know, we've come such a long way, even just through the span of her career. And, you know, as a community, we need to build off that. We have more work to do, and continue to make it better and more welcoming for women in this industry. So a little bit, I know we're running a little bit tight on time. I want to leave time for questions. I can hang around as long as anyone wants to chat questions when we get to that point. So just wrapping up here in terms of being a champion for DE&I. And, for me, it's been a lot about, like I said, self-reflection. We can't solve this issue by kind of waiting for everyone around us. We have to all own it as individuals. And so I wanted to just talk about how a little bit in terms of words matter and being mindful of how you interact with others. So, I made a statement about the diversity in terms of my family and my loved ones. And I had an interaction, I wanted to tell this story. I had an interaction with a leader, someone very high up within the firm that they're associated with. And we were just chit-chatting, and we were talking about if you like to cook or not, right? And I made a comment that, like, hey, I actually don't do much of the cooking. Shout out to my husband, because he does a lot of it these days. And she was like, oh, me too. I usually come home to a cooked meal. And I said, oh my gosh, your husband cooks. That's awesome. And so, we're like celebrating how our husbands cook. And then we walked out of that, it was a couple hours later that we walked out of that meeting room, and she pulled me aside and she said, hey, Sierra. And I was like, what? She's like, hey, I don't have a husband. I'm like, waiting. She's like, I have a wife. And I must have looked like a deer in headlights, because I couldn't believe that I had jumped to those assumptions. And especially with that individual in that context, and the words I had chosen were very, I was not mindful about them. And that really was a light bulb for me, and made me think hard about the fact that, people don't know me. They don't know my upbringing. Their perception of me is their interaction with me, and being more intentional with that. And so, I think there's a couple lessons to that story, right? The first one being mindful, because you never know if you can unintentionally insult someone or hurt their feelings or make them feel unwelcome, because what they seem at face value, you have no idea what's going on with their life and their personal beliefs. Secondly, I think I was so appreciative of her calling, of her letting me know. And because it did cause that light bulb to go off for me. And so I think if you are on the receiving end, maybe of a comment or words that were hurtful, to be open in that dialogue and that conversation, and be comfortable enough, kind of have a go-to phrase maybe to talk to people, and hopefully they're receptive to that, and they're not defensive and try to explain away the language they used or the context of that conversation. And so I think, that's very much a two-way street. We have to be willing, all of us on both sides, to work together to move the needle. And so I did just have a picture of my daughter here, because, she plays ice hockey. This is her laying across the bottom. And that has offered different perspective for me, right? Because I think a lot of us tend to just have thick skin. I'm going to blend in, I'm going to do my thing. And that's it. Right. And so it's different suddenly when it's not you just trying to push through, and it's your child. And she asked me questions like, hey, Mom, why don't I see any women playing hockey on TV? When we watch NHL games, it's like, these are tough discussions. So again, being mindful of my words around her too, and the next generation coming up. And so I'm going to skip the explanation of this picture, but I think if you had a chance to read it, it kind of speaks for itself, that one. And so just some final thoughts here, and then we'll open up for questions. Just, the awesome part about inclusivity and kind of some of the self-work I talked about, and is that it can be accomplished by immediate action on an individual level. We don't have to wait for anybody else to make those changes. And I know, I personally struggle to find time to read. And so I know there's a lot of great presentations out in the mix right now. Sapna, I know you gave one and are giving some more. And I sat in on some internally with Black Veatch about microaggression, which was so eye-opening for me. And it was again on that same theme of words matter and how to use inclusive language. So check for your own filters and unconscious biases. We can't get rid of them. They're human, they're real. Be aware of them. Commit to using inclusive language. Be an ally or advocate. I used to kind of, like I said, I didn't it was an uncomfortable conversation in the workplace or in the professional world. And that's not okay anymore. We can't be silent on these matters. We've got to be willing to talk and engage, which is what's so awesome about this series. Support STEM in your community. So we have a tough time bringing people into our industry as it is, so let alone a diverse workforce into our industry. But we've got to get out earlier in the chain of our future workforce. So college is important that we're engaging there, but we need to get even ahead of it and into the high schools and into the middle schools. And because if they don't see diversity in the workforce, why would they choose that path, right? I didn't know any better because I wasn't living here, as I shared in my story. But I think as a community, that's where I really hope us as individuals can continue to outreach in our individual communities and help drive that diversity up through our industry. And if they don't already exist, start support groups within your organization. Another thing that Bob Davis talked about was how important it is to come from the top down. And I truly agree with that and believe that is incredibly important, but you can't always control that. And if you're within an organization, you work for an employer who isn't driving that from the top, don't be afraid to form some groups and drive from the bottom up. And I did want to just make a plug for the Women's Network. I think Danella mentioned it. It's a network. We get together. It's Women in Water. And we get together at conferences and we get together at different various cities throughout the year to chat and support one another. And so if you're interested on getting on that communication and you're not there, please reach out to either your YP or diversity chair. We can get you in touch with Stacia and Stephanie and get you on those lists so that you can come to those events too. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and move on to this question slide. And this is just two images that speak to us. You can enjoy those if you're not interested in listening to questions and answers. So hand it back over here.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Megan?
Oh, can you hear me, guys?
Yeah,
Awesome.
We're good now.
So actually, while we still have everyone on there, since we're running a little late, if you feel comfortable turning your camera on, we'll take our group picture real quick. If not, don't worry about it. Staff members who provide encouragement and insight to you as you progress in your career.
I'll take that one first. I think Danella talked quite a bit about her peer group and not having necessarily, women mentors. I think I certainly I've had a lot, and I guess my message there would be to have a healthy mix within your organization, outside your organization. As Danella mentioned, don't be afraid to reach out and ask, say, hey, can we coffee chat once a month or every other month? If it's specifically if someone's intriguing to you and you'd like to know more about their career or their life, don't limit yourself to, who that could be. And as Danella said, I fall into the, I know we're talking about gender here and women in water, but and it's important to have those mentors, but certainly I do have tremendous male mentors as well in my career.
Awesome. Danella, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I kind of covered it with regards to, I don't think I can name one or two particular ones. There was probably 3 or 4 that I could name that at certain times in my career was what I would maybe put in the mentor role. And then the others is just, some female peers that it's more of a support and advocate for each other role. So it's a little bit of different. So, but, definitely, key to help us continue to succeed and help each other out and stuff. So.
Awesome. All right. So second one, what would your advice or recommendation be on getting involved in industry more outside of work? And with that, Sierra, I would just like to say I really liked your comment on getting involved in professional organizations for yourself, not for your employer, doing it for yourself. I was just talking to a coworker the other day, you know, because she had an opportunity to take a leadership class with our organization. And she was thinking, you know, like, I don't really have time for it. And, you know, I encouraged her, I said, you know, a lot of times we're always just so busy. There's never really a good time. And sometimes you just kind of have to jump in. And she did. So good for her.
My quick response to that is do it. I mean, I think both Sierra and I pretty much plug, you know, the advantages of getting involved into organizations. You know, we have a pretty tight-knit water family. Like I said, we have a lot of those folks on the screen I'm seeing. It helps increase your network. It helps your career. I know from a water industry, from a water utility perspective, I know, and just the list of the women that I have on there, but not even those. I mean, any one of those I can pick up the phone and call and ask for input on. And I think it goes both ways that way. And it definitely is something you should do.
Awesome.
Agreed.
And then somebody asked, do you have any advice for students, specifically chemical engineering students interested in the water industry?
I guess I'll jump in real quick. You know, obviously going into water industry from a chemistry engineering standpoint is probably isn't a typical career path, but I can tell you that I know of a few chemical engineers that have chosen the water wastewater industry, both on the private, like I said, I'm private and public. I've seen some that has worked on the private side, and we actually have one, I think maybe two chemical engineers here at the city of Columbus. So I think the career opportunities from that standpoint is, you know, treatment, water treatment. There's a lot of chemistry based in water treatment design. So you can use those skill sets in that. So Sierra, I'll let you chime in from your side.
Yeah, no, I would echo that. You know, some of our lead process engineers are of chemical engineering background, and actually, you know, one that I work with in particular, he was within our power business division and then came over to water. And so, you know, that fundamental skill set, I think you can apply to a lot of avenues within our industry.
Awesome, thank you so much. What has been the most interesting project that you've worked on? And kind of along those same lines, what's the most challenging part of your job, would you say?
I kind of had to laugh at this because, you know, I think civil engineers, and from my career, it's kind of underrated. It's not like exciting stuff, you know, show your friends, hey, look, I did that, because, you know, so believe it or not, since I did a lot of utility design work and not above what I call above the ground facilities like plants and stuff that you like, hey, you know, you did this. I know I had a lot of challenging utility projects for one of my clients that we had to do combined sewer separation projects in a very heavy, densely populated roadway. And, you know, believe it or not, there's a lot of challenges for that. So it's not glamorous. Most of the stuff I did was buried under the ground and no one, you know, ever sees it. I know I have at least two jobs I did around Columbus that I had a tunnel bore portion of it that went under the I-71 and 270, but no one knows that. It's not glamorous. So, and the most challenging, I think that changes as you advance in your career. You know, and when you're in design and consulting, you know, I think challenging was just juggling the projects and meeting deadlines. And, you know, sometimes those were crazy deadlines. I think where I'm at in my career now, you know, I don't spend as much time getting into the weeds on the technical. So it's probably more managing staff and operations in the HR side of things. So you'll get that as you advance in your career.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I really can't name a favorite project. I will say though, in the role that I have, what I love the most about it is the variety of projects I see. And just in for some people, that's maybe a very uncomfortable or uneasy thing, but I love that I'm constantly learning new things. And every project I manage is a little bit different. And that energizes me. In terms of challenges, I would say, you know, I have to echo a lot of what Danella said, but for me personally, the challenge for my job, honestly, up until like last year, was the biggest challenge was on the personal front. I just felt like I was never seeing my daughter. You know, I maybe an hour and a half at night, and that's at the end of the day when she's exhausted, you know, because infants go to bed pretty early. And so that was always a challenge for me to manage that. Working from home and she's older now and stays up later, you know, it's not so much, that's not as much of a challenge. And in terms of, you know, I would agree with Danelle in terms of, from a consulting standpoint, always trying to deliver to a schedule and budget. It can be very, especially for people young in their career, it can be incredibly a lot of pressure. And always, you know, having to fill out a timesheet and know that, you know, manage budgets and always work to schedule and budget. And what I you know, my kind of advice there, especially for the younger engineers, is like, you know, have a plan. We all have we have an execution plan, and we have to just work to that plan hour by hour. And if we stay on that plan, it's all going to be okay. So there's no point in stressing about getting to the end goal. And if we're going to get there, okay, we got to focus hour by hour on getting there, and it'll work itself out. So that's would be what I have to say on those questions.
Absolutely. So one participant mentioned that for them, even job descriptions in water and engineering often tend to sound very masculine, and they find it hard to feel included and motivated for applying for these jobs. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's very interesting. I guess I never looked at it that way. I guess, yeah, I guess I don't have a good answer for that, other than, you know what you're capable of, be confident in what you have, and, you know, apply, you're capable, you're an engineer just as anybody else is. So, you know, I try not to be intimidated by that.
Back to my shirt.
Yep.
Yeah, I would on that one, you know, it's hard to know if that's intentional or not, and maybe that's relevant. So, you know, apply and be mindful. I would say be extra mindful in the questions you ask and the interactions if you get to an interview stage, to understand maybe, you know, what's going on exactly there. Just to honestly, to make sure you end up in an environment where you're welcome, and you're not going to end up in an environment that's miserable for you, would kind of be my advice on that one.
Absolutely. And I'd like to plug Sapna just a little bit, but she wrote a very nice article for AWWA talking about having more inclusive language in job descriptions and interviews. So I read that, and it was very well written, Sapna. So I can provide that link to anyone who's interested. And along the same line, to what extent, if at all, does diversity in water impact outreach and involvement of customers and other water stakeholders?
So I kind of read that question a few times. I'm getting a sense that when they talk about customers and water stakeholders, maybe it's got a slant towards utility and stuff. And, I guess you want to try to represent your community from the diversity and dynamic. So I think it's important to think about that when you're hiring in your, especially here, like, for example, here at the city of Columbus. I mean, there's a lot of effort right now with diversity and inclusion. It's very important to our director. And, some of the things that we're doing is doing recruiting within the city of Columbus and Urban League and stuff like that, a concerted effort to recruit, what represents our customers and stuff. So I'm guessing that's kind of where this question is going, unless Sierra, I don't know if you're reading it differently from your standpoint.
No, I guess I would say from my standpoint, kind of viewing customer as our client base, right? And just the teams we put together when we pursue work, a lot of, we're seeing more and more trends that our clients are very diverse and selection committees are diverse, and they're looking for that diversity in our execution teams. And so being mindful of that.
Thank you so much. What advice would you give to women who have understand this question, maybe due to COVID, maybe considering leaving the industry?
Well,
that's a loaded question.
Yeah. I think.
Go ahead, Danella.
Someone approached me, I would ask why and what's the driver here. If it's, hey, I want to start a family and I just don't know I can juggle that, I would probably have one answer. If it's, I feel uncomfortable in the environment, I mentioned that earlier. Some of the research I had was, some people are just not comfortable. Well, I might encourage them to maybe, like what Sierra just said, find the right fit. Just not all workplaces are the same. So I think it just depends. I would inquire more. I try to encourage them to stay, and life's tough. There's times in your career it's going to be tough. And whether you're in engineering or anything else, you got to persevere and stuff like that. So I think maybe some encouragement might help them to rethink their position and stuff. So.
Yeah, I think one, a little bit on that question, some of the conversations Danella and I had, we were in during our conversations thinking back, like, man, we're so incredible. While there's work to do within our industry in terms of gender diversity, I mean, we feel so incredibly grateful. I've had such a great experience in terms of my interactions with clients and with my coworkers and my peers, and so in terms of the males that I've interacted with, and being respectful and supportive, and so I would, my immediate reaction would be the same, as encourage them to stay, because I think it's such an awesome industry to be in.
Okay, awesome. I think we're on to the last question. We've gone through all of them. Someone said they would like to hear some discussion about the wage gap between men and women in civil engineering. What have you done in your career to make sure that your salary keeps pace with your male peers? ASCE says it's 21% in civil engineering versus 8.5% for women across all careers.
Wow, another loaded question.
We're here for real talk.
I mean, to be honest, I think it depends. Some places you work, you don't know what each other makes. Of course, the stats out there shows that men make more than others. I think it depends on private versus public sector. I know we're very conscientious here at the city of Columbus. You know, it isn't a male female thing, it's a job, position, and experience. And you know, unfortunately, it's probably seen more out, I'm guessing, in the private sector. But you know, I know, you know, one thing you can think about when you're you know, getting an opportunity to advance, and that topic of you know, money comes up, you know, you got to know where you should be, you know, and you got to know what you're bringing to the table, and you got to ask those questions when you're negotiating and stuff. So I think you got to be educated yourself on where you should be, and you got to advocate yourself when the time comes. You know, so it's tough, because sometimes you don't know all the answers. You think you know all the answers, but I just think, you know, sometimes, you know, I see, you know, and this is not just women, you know, some people think they're worth more than what they are, you know, and good for them. But when you stack it up with other folks, you know, it may not be the same. So, but I think it's very important as a woman in this career, in any career, that you know where you should be from a pay scale, and be willing to bring it up and discuss that when the opportunity, you know, arises, especially if you're getting a promotional opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you guys have any recommendations or any thoughts on the art of the ask? So I think that there's some hesitancy sometimes with women on asking for things like promotion. Do you have any tips on kind of how to go about, you know, things like raises and kind of the art of the ask?
Well, you know, timing's everything. Some of that is, you know, I guess, and this is kind of, I don't know how to relay this, but I guess if you're going to ask, make sure you're able to back it up. You know, if you got to be, I don't want to say a star employee, but when you come to the table, you need to be able to present yourself on what all that you have been able to do to provide to that company. What you know, you got to be able to sell yourself, and and what you're selling, you got to be able to back up. Because if you're coming to me to ask for a raise or increase, but you know, you don't have the work to back it up, it's going to be a harder sell. So, you know, I you know, I guess don't ask just to ask, you know, because there's a lot in, you know, when you get to the point of managing people and managing, you know, there's a time when you know, decisions on, you know, raises or bonuses or whatever. You know, we don't have, you know, private sector, I think sometimes those bonuses, there's a lot that goes into it, and you may not know everything about that. So, but, you know, it goes back to working hard, you know, asking for more work, expanding horizons. And like I tell my kids, the rest will come later, you know. And are we equitable between male and females? Obviously the stats are saying we aren't, but I think we're a lot better than where we were. So
Yeah, and I guess the one piece I would add to that is sometimes, you know, maybe you're not comfortable speaking to your direct supervisor for whatever reason. Find someone else within your organization to have that conversation with, and let them advocate for you from a different direction, or at least help with the points that Danella mentioned about getting you enough information. And it you know, just ask, like, of my peers, you know, where am I falling within my peer group? And and know that. And if you're not where you want to be, ask the questions of what can I do? What do I need to do? And you know, come from that place. And then that conversation will start to tell you, like, is this just because unfortunately there's a quality issue here, or is this because I actually have work to do, and make it that kind of productive conversation. And even just the conversation itself with the right people, you know, will essentially maybe heighten their awareness that you're paying attention to it.
Yeah, Sierra, I think you said it much better than I did, but yeah.
Maybe I've been through it before.
Well, yeah. I mean, like you said, talking, you know, to a peer, making sure you're not missing something, you know, and is definitely a good direction too. So.
Okay, awesome. Well, with that, thank you so much, Sierra and Danella. Really just a really wonderful presentation. And thank you so much. And with that, I just wanted to plug really quick.
I did want to just let you all, oh, can I just let you all know real quick that the answer to the quiz was, it's a scene in the newest Wonder Woman. And so there's a scientist and she's like in the lab and someone's like, basically she says she trips and she's like, scientists don't wear heels. And they're like, well, sometimes we do, because she's, you know, dressed in heels. And so it was kind of stereotyping based on dress. So when you're watching Wonder Woman, the most recent one, you'll now remember the scene, and it was leopard heels that she was wearing. So anyhow, back to you, Megan.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. So our next event is March 18th at 5:30. We do these on Thursdays with the Quantiogram. We hope you will join us for our next one, and just thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Well done.